For the last 10 years, rehab's been really good. And we know the basic science of physiology and training and diet and nutrition. Like, we've really got the fundamentals, but it's not working. And what's underneath it that's not working? What's the understanding of all this body of knowledge that we've got, that people are still getting very, very injured, really frustrated with what they're doing. More and more people are falling through the cracks. But I think a lot of people are saying, well, this doesn't work for me and this is not landing well. Or I've done all the rehab, all the things, and I'm still injured. It's a complex and interesting area. And I think, like you're saying, it's almost like lemmings. One or two lemmings have jumped off, and now it's like the floodgates are starting to open where people are really starting to look at their health, consider their health. I encourage people to start learning how to trust themselves, take back their agency, take back their control. You really need to know and trust your body, and then you'll find the right providers come to you, or you'll find the right people.
Couldn't agree more. I think we're overwhelmed with information and we're starved for wisdom and understanding.
Welcome back to the Restore to Explore podcast. In this week's episode, our founder Nick is joined by Lawrence van Lingen. He's a movement specialist, sports chiropractor, and former high-performance manager for Red Bull South Africa. With over 20 years of experience working with Olympic champions, elite athletes, and everyday movers alike, Lawrence shares some really powerful insights into what the human body looks and feels like when it's functioning at its absolute best. Drawing from his work with world-class triathletes, runners, cyclists, and athletes across nearly every discipline, Lawrence now blends movement, breath, bodywork, and lifestyle into a deeply integrated approach to health, one that places nervous system health and fascial integration at the core. Together, Nick and Lawrence explore the shifting landscape of modern healthcare, the importance of authenticity and community, and how reclaiming your health begins with personal responsibility. From the role of pain as a teacher to the power of play and presence, this conversation is packed with wisdom that applies to everyone, not just athletes who want to move and feel better for life. We hope you enjoy.
Before we jump into this week's episode, I wanted to share a little bit about my own barefoot journey. I remember the moment I slipped on my first pair of natural footwear. After years of wearing stiff, narrow, cushioned shoes that kept my feet squished and locked in place, it felt like a light bulb had gone off. It was the first time wearing shoes that I could truly feel the ground beneath me. My feet finally felt free. Those shoes were Vivo Barefoots. Up to that point, I'd never really considered my foot health. I never questioned the shoes I wore, but when I experienced that freeing sensation in Vivos, everything changed. It was one of the reasons I joined the Foot Collective. I began to pay more attention to my feet, realizing how much better they could feel in shoes if I simply allowed them to move the way nature intended. When it comes to feet, one of the most powerful changes you can make for their health is to switch to natural footwear. That's why we look for 5 key footwear qualities at TFC. We call the 5 Fs. Foot-shaped, widest at the tips of the toes, fixed so they can't flip or flop around, flat, a zero drop from heel to toe, flexible to allow your feet to move naturally, and feel to give you the sensation from the ground beneath you. Vivo Barefoot tick all the boxes. And that's why I'm so proud we're partnering with Vivo Barefoot for the Restore to Explore podcast, the world leaders in natural footwear. Their mission is deeply aligned with ours at TFC, focusing on human health and, just as importantly, the health of the planet. Together, we're not just promoting better movement, but better practices for our world. So if you're ready to experience the freedom for your feet that I did, check out Vivo Barefoot. It's not just about shoes, it's about stepping into a new way of living and a new way of caring for your body and the planet. We're so proud to be on this journey together, and we have a special offer just for our listeners. If you head to vivobarefoot.com and use the code TheFootCollective, you'll save 20%.
Hello, TFC community. Welcome to the Restore to Explore podcast. My name is Nick, and today I have the honor of hosting a conversation with Lawrence van Lingen. So Lawrence, welcome, and thank you for being here.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Amazing. So I think we just zoom out and start with your backstory. So for those who don't know you, maybe talk a bit about what you're doing today, and then work backwards as to how you came to be doing that. And you can have it be as long or as short as you want. And I'm keen to learn more about you.
Okay. So at the moment, I work kind of in a space of, I think a good way of looking at it is filling in the blanks. So I work a lot with high performance athletes, particularly triathletes, help them move better, run better, trust their bodies. Often used, or I often help people with injuries that can't be solved. So I have a sort of I suppose you're looking, when athletes reach out to me, generally speaking, they're looking for something different or not the norm, because they've kind of got stuck in the mainstream. So they want an alternative approach or a different solution to problems. So like a good example was Jan Frodeno said, look, I'm done. No one I know can help me, and I know the best. I need a different approach. So that's what often where I sort of work in now. And so it's kind of a weird spot where I do sort of movement and breathing and running technique and foot strengthening and alignment, but just probably not the way mainstream sees it. And my background is I started as a chiropractor, then specialized as a sports chiropractor. I was really into working with athletes. Then I got into rehab. And then back in the day when it was a big buzzword, into core strength and mobility and movement training classes. And then I've been a jack of all trades. I used to work with the rugby team. I used to work with the Natal Sharks actually for a little while. And I did, again, sort of open movement patterns and conditioning and strengthening and drills and eye movements. And I've got I've done a lot of things. One other aspect that seems to influence the way I think now is I used to testify in court for road accident victims and car accidents, and then also for work-related injuries. And I think that those big data numbers in terms of what happens when you wreck a nervous system, what the likely outcomes and the deterioration of quality of life, and then also really interesting things like in workplace environments, people that are under time stress tend to have back pain or these weird. We weren't taught this when I was studying, you know what I mean? But big data studies, and we know, like, pretty, if you put someone under time pressure, their shoulders will tighten up and their low back will tighten up. And so I think, quite a wide variety of skills. And I came to the US and I didn't relicense as a chiropractor. I had a look at the curriculum and the course, and I was like, this is not for me. And I don't want to identify with what's going on. And I'd kind of really got involved in fascia and nerves. I also, for a period of time, I really worked on a lot of very serious back pain, like failed back pain, chronic pain, and again that massive area of consequence and respect for a nervous system. And so when I came to America, I've fallen into the structural integration, which is kind of rolfing or fascia, nerves, movement, and that's kind of where I play around now.
Brilliant. Yeah, lots of different areas, and I think there's probably a lot of cross-pollination, right? Because it broadens your pattern recognition to be able to see more sides of the Rubik's Cube when it comes to working with complex humans, complex dysfunction. And I think the profession labels end up becoming quite limiting just in general, right? I think one label that I identify with most these days is just a health professional, which I think a lot of disease care professionals probably identify as health professionals. But I think delineating the world, the paradigm of disease care, which is all about managing and identifying disease and dysfunction, versus healthcare, which is really all about helping people feel empowered to take better care of themselves, is such an important distinction to make. And I think with that in mind, identifying as a health professional actually makes you quite unique and quite niche, frankly, right now. And I think that's the most exciting. This paradigm shift, which seems to be picking up quite a bit of steam, it kind of feels like we're in year one of a decade of major change that we've been primed to kind of enter. Has excited me about this, the world of movement and the world of healthcare more than ever before, especially since 2015, where it was like being a healthcare pro in a disease care world meant you were an oddball and you were rare.
Well, you still are.
But
I am too.
We're getting, we have pro sports teams reaching out to us. We have a much bigger community following, and there seems to be this Overton window that's opened where people are. I think the story that brings people to you, where they've tried the conventional and it's not working, and they're open to trying something different. Like pain has nudged them to having a broader mindset, to be open to more things. I think this is happening at an accelerating rate because the end destination of disease care is everyone is super injured, in pain, but not dead. And those are that is like this beautiful primed state of readiness for people to say, I'm okay to try something a little bit different. Yeah, before we were talking about just the notion of a paradigm shift. So I'd love to hear your take on what I don't know how many years you've been at this, but are you seeing something different now? Is there what is getting you most excited these days? And do you feel like we're in a space where progress is happening quicker or things are changing? I'd love to hear your take on that.
Oh, yeah. How much time have we got?
We got 47 minutes, so you take as long as you want with that one.
Well, I've got more than 47 minutes worth of talking about that one. I think that, so I think since the advent of smartphones, I think the collective consciousness has changed and people's nervous system has changed. And I think like a defining way of looking at that, and this is not my idea, is before knowledge was valuable and we were rewarded for seeking out knowledge, and building up knowledge made you more powerful or better at what you did, or however you want to put it, right? But it was difficult to come by. So you had to go to college and you had to study, or you had to go and apprentice under someone. And I think with the advent of sort of between the internet and smartphones, suddenly we have an abundance of knowledge for the first time in our entire existence as a human species. And I think now what's really important is being able to join the dots or filter out the noise and trying to find clear signal or clear path. And I think that's the biggest shift. And I don't think a lot of people are aware of it. And I think also like sort of just technology, this constant stimulation, the constant bombardment of knowledge, the constant doubting of process. I mean, let's go back 15 years ago, you went to see the doctor and what the doctor said was what you did. And you trusted the doctor. If you didn't like the doctor, you went to another doctor, right? Now you go onto Google and you research and you go to the doctor and you probably know more about the condition in your mind than he does. And, it's just a very, very different space. And I think you work with athletes, they're constantly saying, but these people are doing that. Why aren't we doing this? Like, because you have access to seeing sort of like quite superficially, I think most of the time, like what other athletes are doing, or you'll see them doing some set of exercises and you're not doing that. And then, so I think a lot of people feel lost or overwhelmed or have a loss of agency. So I think playing around in that space, this from what I'm seeing, to really answer your question, is I see overloaded nervous systems. And I'm not sure if it was like that before as much. I don't know if I had the awareness. I think moving to America, which is, very different from South Africa, might be part of it. But I think, so in running, we're seeing dystonia or dyskinesis or weird neurological patterns, or some people like with POTS or, and triggered off by running. And I think that's, for me, is very new. And I think there's a world where we're very competent. I was saying to someone the other day, like for the last 10 years, rehab's been really good. And we know the basic science of physiology and training and diet and nutrition. Like we've really got the fundamentals, but it's not working. And, what's underneath it that's not working? What's the understanding of all this body of knowledge that we've got that people are still getting very, very injured, really frustrated with what they're doing? I think there's more and more people are falling through the cracks, as it were. A lot of people respond and it's fine, and superficially it's fine. But I think a lot of people are saying, well, this doesn't work for me and this is not landing well, or I've done all the rehab, all the things, and I'm still injured, So I don't know. It's a complex and interesting area. And I think, like you're saying, it's almost like lemmings, one or two lemmings have jumped off, and now it's like the floodgates are starting to open where people are really starting to look at their health, consider their health. I think it's a overwhelming space, like did you ice bath this morning? Did you, like the list of checklists of health is extraordinary. So it's an interesting frontier, but people definitely I encourage people to start learning how to trust themselves, take back their agency, take back their control, take back some sense of identity. You really need to know and trust your body, and then you'll find the right providers come to you, or you'll find the right people. But if you're, I think, that's kind of enough.
That was good. And I couldn't agree more. I think we're overwhelmed with information and we're starved for wisdom and understanding, because there's
that's a beautiful way of putting it.
It's like the inability to the inability to parse signal from noise, I think, is something that requires people to actually think for themselves, maybe even go down to first principles and really be really solid in foundational assumptions we know to be true, which there's not very many of. But I think, I never went down there in physio school. So I was never given this base framework to think for myself. It was always about knowledge absorption, right? Like appeal to authority. The professor is telling me something that is correct. I must apply that in my profession. And I think now it's such a different world, where now it's the ability to think critically is actually the primary asset, probably in every profession. Because frankly, the idea of memorizing swaths of information in the age of information abundance is just not, it's a waste of your hard drive. And one thing question I'd like to ask people of different backgrounds is, it can be a challenging one, but I'd be curious to know your answer. How do you define health in 1 to 2 sentences? And I'm not going to hold you to this answer. It can be different tomorrow, but I'd love to know, how do you define health in simple terms, 1 to 2 sentences?
I'm really big on the fact that you should be able to express yourself authentically. And I think a human that can express themselves authentically and have purpose, health will follow. But I think if you don't have purpose, if you battle to express in some, and authenticity is like it's a very complex word. Like, what does it mean? Well, how do you show up? How do you present? How are you sort of creating some sense of agency in the world? Because I think a lot of people are just on reflex defensive mode, and basically being railroaded through life by reflex patterns and thought behaviors. And so I think, we were talking a little bit about longevity the other day, and this is more than 2 sentences, okay? But to explain the back context, my gran lived until she was like 98, sharp as a tack, amazing, but she had real purpose. And she was sort of looking after my uncle. And then my uncle sort of moved away, and my gran didn't last 3 months. And, I think we got like in the age of longevity and protocols and, big podcasts on health and longevity. If you don't have purpose, you can take as many supplements and as many protocols as you like, and then is that purpose healthy? So I don't know, like a kind of crazy example of that would be like Warren Buffett. He loves what he does, very philanthropic, gives back to the world. His diet's probably not the best in the world. Apparently, he drinks Coca-Cola and McDonald's, eats McDonald's, but he has purpose and agency and community, and he's valued, and he has passion and curiosity, and he's deeply authentic. He just is who he is. He's totally comfortable with who he is, and he enjoys what he does. And the guy's 95 and doing really, really well. So for me, health really relies on that. I think if you get that right, you start to make better choices because you value and trust and respect yourself. So you're not going to do things that are self-harming to yourself, and so really it gives you a tailwind to then move out through the world. Whereas what I don't think is healthy is to say, this is back to the disease paradigm. I must have this because I suffer from this, or, people will always internalize like my ADHD or my allergies or my whatever. No, at the moment in time, you seem to have a predisposition to this, or it's flaring up at the moment. It's not you. It's not part of your personality. And I think once you really get a deep sense of authentic self, those things start to fall into perspective, and you realize like, oh, that's something that's afflicting me at the moment, not necessarily always. And it really does start empowering people to make better choices. And that's what we need to do. We're in reactive mode. It's just binary. It's this or that, wrong or right, yes or no, my way or the highway.
Yeah, better choices. That really is, in order for the culture of health to change, people have to be empowered to make better choices. And I think that requires not more, ironically, it will actually probably require far less information, right? Like mostly deleting the information that they've internalized so that they can make space for the most important information.
Yeah, but choices are hard though.
Yeah.
So decision, there's Robert Sapolsky's, got a great book called Determined. You almost don't have free will. People think they make choices, but I think like there's a great guy, Jonathan Haidt, he writes about like the rider on the elephant. The elephant makes all the decisions. And then we, on the back of the elephant as the rider, we justify the elephant's behavior afterwards. And it's extraordinary. You can literally have two decision-making things put in front of you, and you can push this button or that button. So you're going to make a choice. You're going to vote, right? And you choose, you move towards the button before your rational mind has figured out the question and the answer. So basically, your nervous system chose for you, and then you're going to justify which choice you made. So habits, I think, are so incredibly powerful and ingrained, and people don't have as much choice and free will as they think they do. That's kind of where I think we're buffering up again. And to be able to make the right choices, you have to be in a healthy, trusting environment. You have to feel secure. You have to feel like it's okay to make mistakes, because you're going to make mistakes, and that's okay. Whereas a lot of people are like, I've got to get this just right, and you don't have to get it right the first time. You don't even have to get it right 100 times. But there's the rules of the human body or something is, you have a body, you will live in it. There's no swapping, not yet anyway. I think Elon's working on that. But one of the body swapping, or like swapping your consciousness to another sleeve or something like out of science fiction. But one of the things is like you will be taught lessons, and until you learn the lesson, you'll just keep repeating the lesson again and again endlessly. And that's what people do. Like, and you think we're all probably addicted to something. Why are we addicted? You're like, what's underneath that? And getting down to a safe space to sort of unpack that, so then you can show up and actually change is extraordinary. And for what you guys is amazing, because you're creating a culture, and a culture is the coach. And then people learn from culture and seeing other people doing it and other people's success stories, probably more than if you tell them this is what you need to do.
Yeah, I think for me, I always try to avoid telling people what to do. I think there are certain things that I feel pretty confident that I could tell people to stop doing, and it would benefit them. But telling people what to do is a far more presumptuous thing. And just to what you were saying before, it's like about the lessons. I heard saying once, said, pain is the ultimate teacher, but no one wants to go to class, because everyone is given this hall pass to say, you know what? Class is pretty tough. Here's the ticket out of class, right? Here's the drug. Here's the thing to numb whatever discomfort you're going to feel. But until you actually show up to class, you won't learn the lessons. And if you repeat the lesson over and over again, that's kind of insane. And yet we have this culture that treats the human body like a machine, like a complicated structure that can be broken down and compartmentalized and isolated. And we've moved away from just having a bit of a magical understanding of the human body as something that is so incredibly advanced and is not complicated, but is actually complex, where there is no ability to compartmentalize things and actually meaningfully affect the system. It's like a forest, right? Like you can't just break down the forest into parts just like you would break down an aircraft. They're two different sort of systems. And I think if more people appreciated the body as a complex system where there's all these interdependencies and there's so many variables that we don't even understand. And my favorite protocol is kind of like 3 principles that I think I try and convey to anyone that comes to me with questions about their health. It's number 1, adopt a long-term mindset and know that there is no, fast food has a consequence. Fast health doesn't exist, because you're cheating somewhere and it's going to bite you in the ass. And so think long-term. 2 is delete the unnatural stuff you're doing, which underneath that requires an understanding of like, what is natural? What is my biology geared for? And then add natural stuff. And I think too many times people don't take a long-term mindset. They forget to delete the stuff causing the problem, and they go straight to adding more stuff. And so again, it's all part of this same nervous system overwhelm. It's like, now I got to do the cold plunge. Now I got to go do this workout. Now I got to do this mobility exercise. It's like, well, what if you just stopped sitting in a chair, stopped wearing shoes that messed your feet up, and went for a walk? That might actually be more powerful and got some natural light, So this idea of lower your time preference, take a long-term approach, delete the unnatural stuff first. That's the primary focus first. And then start adding in natural things that, it's really not rocket science. It's like the 80-20 is 80% of the benefits are going to come from doing 20% of the really human things that we've lost touch with really consistently. And I actually think that simple approach is, I almost see people relax when they actually get that. Like their shoulders go down, their breathing lowers, because they're like, oh my God, I don't have to learn a billion more things. I don't have to do all these extra things. My schedule is already full. I don't have time for extra stuff.
Yeah.
And has it been,
Yeah, and it's
have
to
you found
simplify
that?
and reduce, and it's,
Yeah.
and people, like, I don't think enough people realize when they're having a cold plunge that that's a reaction. It's like, it's much better for you. And I don't, not saying it's the worst thing in the world. And some people really respond well for it and go for it if that's your thing. But it is almost like taking a pill for a pain. It's a symptomatic addressing of something, because it's a very strong intervention. And I mean, and the case can be made going for a walk in nature is also a pill for, an antidote. So I don't want to like throw sort of ice bathing too much under the rug, but a lot of our healthy approach or trying to be healthy is actually quite a strong reaction to some underlying thing that we need to address.
Yeah, and I don't think modern disease care professionals are actually equipped to really go that deep, right? Like the disease care interventionist relationship is one of superficiality and one of symptom mitigation. That is the fundamental scope of that relationship, and that's just a broken model. And I think in my experience, it's pretty hard to have someone come from the disease care world and make the leap to healthcare. It certainly is possible, but there isn't a crazy small number of people who have the capacity to actually let go of everything that they've done forever and the business models they're comfortable with and actually move into a different world. And so I think the new people coming into the space that have maybe a more grounded understanding of human physiology, they're the ones that can pioneer this new way of doing things. And I think change is just, the old saying in finance is change happens one funeral at a time. And maybe to be less morbid, change happens one retirement at a time, where I think we're going to have a new generation of health professionals that are incentivized and make money by helping people take better care of themselves instead of simply being the false hero to rescue the victims from the bad guy, which is pain. And that paradigm completely shifts, where it's like, now I'm actually the guide that helps you learn from the teacher, which is pain. And that's such a different way of thinking about it. But I think I don't know. I've never actually had a good conversation with someone where we went over that and they disagreed with it. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. And so I've got lots of thoughts about that. So one is, did you have a defining moment where your brain sort of flipped and you went like, oh, hang on, there's a different way? Was it pretty clear cut? Did you have this sort of epiphany, or was it pretty slow?
I think that the healthcare disease care has been slow. I did have an epiphany with feet when I realized that my whole life, including my life as a physiotherapist, treating people for foot dysfunction was essentially a lie, because I myself had foot dysfunction. And once I realized that the shoes I was wearing was causing my foot dysfunction, and I saw it in everyone else, it was one of the most significant moments of cognitive dissonance, where I was like, what am I doing? Should I even be, is this negligent for me to even be treating people? I don't even know how to fix issues of my own. And I kind of transmuted that into, every time someone comes in, I'm going to get them to take their shoes off, and I'm going to talk about shoes with everyone I see, because that's my way of being able to help them make one small change that might pay dividends for the rest of their life. So I did have a sharp moment with that, but I think with disease care and healthcare, it's just been through conversations. And what about you? Was it a slow burn, or was there a moment for you?
Well, I think luckily, or part of chiropractic sort of philosophy would be, if you can get it right, sort of this proactive health, not a disease paradigm. So I think you exposed to it pretty early on, and it's there if you want to absorb it or not. We were very medically trained. So then again, we had to study pathology and disease and I think, for people that don't really have a perspective in this, when, Louis Pasteur figured out there was a bacteria, Europe had been at war for probably a couple of 100 years. And, he saw a pathogen and he decided that pathogen must die, because that was how you dealt with a foreign invasion. And rather than sort of this notion that, we have pathogens all over us all the time, what precipitates it to the point where it gets an infection and gets out of control? So they weren't, it was an interesting time, but, modern therapists, like doctors, physical therapists, or sort of the people we're running around with, you you're taught a disease paradigm, and that's the philosophy. And it's very, very difficult to, especially when your lectures are convincing, the textbooks are big, you spend a lot of money on education. It's really difficult to start reframing it because you're just not taught, or and it's cultural. So here's one thing that I'm pretty fascinated with at the moment is like the most savage thing you can probably do to another human is ostracize them. So, or isolate them, or separate them out from a community. So like in prison, the worst punishment is solitary confinement. And I think, it's kind of crazy. We got this little bit of a cancel culture, but also this notion of like, sure, you've experienced this, is where if you don't agree with me, we're going to cut you out, or it's not, the systems start to defend themselves, and they defend themselves with ostracism, which I think is whether people know it or not, like it's my way or the highway. Or I'm sure you've heard people say sort of, I practice evidence-based medicine, because kind of what you're saying is rubbing up against some part of how they approach things. And it's extraordinary. I think that's one of the things is to, you've got to be, we talk about the pain of change needs to sort of exceed the pain of the condition you're in, and then you'll change. But I think, one of the things that's holding people back is social pariah, or being socially outcast. And again, that comes back to sort of creating communities so that you can then come into a community and feel safe and connected, and see and learn from others, and see that, you don't explode if you sort of walk barefoot, or, you can start learning from others, and that collective learning is important. So that's why I love that you guys have got a sort of community. But anyway, to get back to your question, the one big epiphany I had was fascia. I'd been treating and playing around with fascia, and we did dry needling, and I was trying to get my head around it. And then one day I just, almost like a different set of lenses went on my eyes, and I had one look, and I was like, oh my, that hip's not dropping because of a weakness. That's tension pulling, distorting the person into that position. And I had the same thing. I was like, a lot of, I think, the patterns in rehab that we were doing was feeding into this dysfunction. It wasn't helping. It wasn't enough to sort of create the change that we needed. And I basically, I went through the same thing as you. I was like, I don't really know if I should prescribe an exercise or rehab for this, because I don't understand what I'm doing. And that was pretty weird. Really, and that's also why, I don't know, someone was asking why didn't I license as a chiropractor? Again, I don't want to manipulate joints. I want joints to sort of relax and fall into place. And I want the person to figure out how to create enough space and ease in their body so that they don't need manipulation. And manipulation is an interesting word. Why would you want to manipulate someone? I know they play around with adjustments or manipulation, but it's that sort of thing. So yeah, I was very disempowered for a while. And I think for anyone that's listening, because you might be sort of wanting to make the leap into healthcare from disease care. One of the most, the empowering thing was coming to America and losing my chiropractic license. I thought I was a big deal in South Africa. I was doing pretty well for myself, but I had a lot of agency. I could dry needle, I could manipulate, I could call up MRIs, I could do a lot. And coming to America gave away a lot of that. And by taking away a lot of what I was doing, allowed me to get really, really good with my hands and soft tissue. And then I had an incident where I had a tumor in my forearm, and we didn't know what it was for months. And I realized, like, well, I might never be able to treat people again. Some people call me magic hands. Like, you might never be able to use your magic hands again. So that was really empowering, because then I shifted focus into movement and structure and how you could teach it, and trying to help people just through movement. And what if I never could touch another person again? And so it's often by actually taking away the thing that you're most powerful in is, I think, the most liberating and the most empowering. And yeah, we got to be brave, I suppose.
That's very powerful, because that was what I was going to ask you. It was like, sure, it was probably a big change, maybe uncomfortable even, but the liberation you get from no longer having this costume that you have to act the part for is almost broadens the opportunity scape of what you can actually do and how you can do it. Like, you're no longer confined. Like the metaphor of the hermit crab, who has this beautiful shell, super comfortable, feels very safe, but eventually you can't grow beyond the size of the shell, and you have to get naked and be vulnerable and be defenseless as you find the bigger shell. And if you don't know what shell you're going to, that could be a scary time, right? And I think the big thing one thing I love about the Foot Collective is this: we've done our best to instill a cultural sort of ethos of good faith disagreement is actually really important. Like if we're all agreeing all the time, someone's not thinking for themselves.
Yeah.
And being able to foster good faith disagreement is actually a beautiful and powerful element of actually harnessing collective intelligence, because you all of a sudden, it becomes a meritocracy for ideas. It is not appeal to authority. It is not, the problem with saying evidence-based research is that you're hiding behind this veil of quote unquote evidence. It's like, well, what evidence? Who created that? What was the methodology? Like, people don't go deep enough to actually be able to defend that. And it's more of just a way to discount the other person's opinion as a defense mechanism, but it's not actually logical or in good faith often. So I think the idea of being able to disagree and feeling comfortable that you can walk into a space, digital or in person, and disagree pretty intensely if that's really what you feel, but know that when better information presents itself, you can change your opinion. You can change how you think. And I think that's the biggest thing we see with all the pros at the Foot Collective is like, they've all got these different background stories, but the one common thing is an openness to listening and to reevaluating frameworks that they're using and letting the best ideas win, it's maybe not even best, but the most grounded frameworks should be looked at with the strongest sort of amount of merit. And I think one thing I wish I would have learned, I wish I would have talked to Week about this in physio school, because I think this is the one principle that I think gives me the most insight into any issue that people are coming to see me for, is the SAID principle, like specific adaptation to impose demand. And I think what it did for me was made me view every single case of dysfunction as, well, I don't really care about the specific adaptation, which is the pain or the limitation. Yeah. Like, what was the imposed demand that could potentially cause this specific adaptation? So it went from, a hardware fault where the body's flawed, it's broken, I'm here to rescue you, to the body's perfect. What are you doing with your body that's causing it to malfunction? Because it's not the body's fault. And I think that's a fundamentally different paradigm than everything I was taught in physio school, which was the body's flawed, it breaks down, I exist as the hero to fix people's body, which I realized very quickly is like, that's a lie. But I think it's a principle that's understandable by everyone. And if people can start to be their own best advocate, like, there's nothing wrong with going to see a pro. In fact, I think it's actually a really effective at times. But you should have enough of a base understanding that you can triage or at least think through problems so that you can go and see, so that you can, number one, find the right pro who's not just going to give you a pill and say, here you go. But so that you can go there and actually have a conversation about the issue you're facing, instead of just being there and being a passive adopter of whatever you're being told. And that's a different world, right? It's no longer this, place of authority to be a health professional. It's actually just an honor to be the person who's taking the best care of themselves, who then people are gravitating to say, what are you doing to be like that, right? Like, leading by example should be the default in health. And I think for a long time, I used to treat doctors all the time, and they were in rough shape. And I was like, something's wrong here, because you're being viewed in society as the healer, and all of you are doing like completely the wrong things, sleep deprived, on screens all day, very little purpose and meaning in your life, super sick. And yet people are going to see you to be healed. Like, this is not going to have a good result. I think it's changing gradually.
Yeah, I think so. Well, it's really hard. I mean, like, the weight of that change is extraordinary. And I think you're right. Like, the next generation might be solving this. In the US, you have insurance, and insurance will tell you, like, if you treat someone's neck and they have a foot complaint, that's called fraud, because the patient pays insurance, insurance pays you. So it's a triangle. So you're not even, you're not even being paid by the patient. You're being paid by insurance, and they're telling you what you can and can't do, which is a third party that's totally just wants to make money. So it's extraordinarily difficult to start having agency in that space in the beginning, and to recognize that you don't have as much agency. And yeah, totally. Doctors will often say, "Do as I say, not do as I do." And I think for physical therapy and foot people, sort of in this space, like, look, trust me, if I have an accident, modern trauma care and trauma response in first world care is absolutely extraordinary. So let's just respect that massively. And the disease model, the progression of some of the drugs and the advancements and the MRIs and the scans is just extraordinary. So there's a lot of good going on. It's not just all bad. It's just, how do we keep the good and then enhance the good? And like you say, have open discussions. And I'm very adamant. I say to people, if I said it last year, it doesn't mean I still believe that, so I have a little YouTube channel, and I've deleted my entire YouTube channel once, and then I didn't like the verbiage of the second time. The content wasn't so bad, or the movements weren't so bad. I just didn't like the way I spoke to people. So I deleted that in its entirety as well. And, I don't think enough people hold their knowledge lightly in their hand, and just be able to say, oh, I don't believe that anymore, or that's not the most effective route, or I have a new understanding. And to get back to you as well is like, because hopefully maybe this conversation just inspires one person to have a big paradigm shift. And so, for those people,
that could affect 1,000 people.
Yeah, that one person, the ripple, will affect hundreds. So you only need to change one person, to create massive change, or the right person. And you'll have a new thriving new practice that's more powerful and more engaged, and you'll be more fulfilled than you were. I worked with a triathlon coach, and she was saying, desperate to get her triathletes to listen to me and do Zooms with them. And I said, like, what's going to happen is you've changed so much, you're going to lose your entire triathlon squad. They want the old you, and you almost putting in a burden of obligation on them to change, and that's not fair. They'll change if they want to change, and you can just be a role model, but you're trying to make them change. It's not going to work. And what happens is she lost her entire triathlon squad, basically. But now she's got a new triathlon squad that's amazing, because they want something deeper and they want more of her. And she's just fulfilled and lighting up, and, her whole world's changed and open. But the opposite, the cognitive dissonance of breaking down, so let's say evidence-based medicine or whatever was the scientific method. If there's a binary sort of paradigm, there's this or that, you can't actually argue the other case unless you understand the other case. So you can't defend it's wrong to defend what you know. You have to understand from the other side perspective, and you have to be able to tear down the faults of your own structure. And for most people, that's so traumatic, kind of like being ostracized, like to build up this power of knowledge, this money, this time, the hours and hours that you spent, everyone around you believing the same thing, everyone around you doing it the same way, reaffirmation that it's the same way, your success stories that are tied up in that, to turn around and to start breaking down that tower that you've built is probably, there's few things more stressful than that. It'll be like death and divorce. And so most people just never do it. And I think the best way to approach that would be to, when hopefully your college, you were taught that 50% of what you're being taught is probably wrong. And something like 50% of what you're taught 5 years out of college is no longer true. We just don't know which 50%. And so always hold your knowledge lightly in your hand. You might be very, very wrong, and immerse yourself in the fundamentals, like anatomy, like really understanding anatomy well, the bony structure, the nerves, the muscle actions. That's a safe space to sort of double down on, with techniques and fads, and they often work until they don't work. And I think also humans and the collective and the change that we're seeing now is so dramatic. Like we had the Industrial Revolution, which totally changed planet Earth. Now we've got an information revolution, which is going to totally change planet Earth and humans. And you better get ready for change, I think. It's coming whether you like it or not.
If you're afraid of it, you're going to live in fear, because it's coming faster than it ever has before.
Yeah.
And I guess one thing that I was going to mention is just the idea that the business of disease is actually the biggest obstacle to health is this very interesting statement to kind of like really sit on, because until we acknowledge that the business of disease has nothing to do with health and may actually be the enemy of health, we can't actually meaningfully start to change things, right? We can't just put nice clothes on the disease care system and then say, we've changed things, it's going to get better. And I think there's been this kind of tiptoeing because of the power, right? If you're a doctor and you're being the black sheep of that profession, it's very likely that you'll just get blackballed. And then your whole career, your livelihood, maybe even your family could be in jeopardy because of that, because you can't pay your bills, you can't pay the golden handcuffs of debt that you've gotten into. So I don't discount how intense that can be viscerally and actually and just in real life economically. But one thing I was going to say, when you're talking about, the willingness to change your mind and holding information loosely and sort of this flexibility in thinking, why do you think, where did you get that from for yourself? Was that something, is there anything you can identify as the source of that? Like people that you're around, your family, life events, whatever it might be. And why do you think it's not the norm? Because the way I see it is people like to grip onto their perspectives very tightly. And what makes someone likely to be flexible in their thinking versus rigid? Is there any insights there?
You ask some big questions.
Sorry. Sorry, not sorry.
No, I think I kind of had a sort of curious and always trying to understand the big picture kind of brain, which got me into trouble at school. I wasn't the best student because I was trying, I wanted to know everything. And then I had a hard time actually studying enough to pass an exam kind of thing. But what I will tell you is that the more I think somatovisceral movement is absolutely deficient in the human world at the moment. So that's slow, soft, central movement, going back to kind of when we were worms or alligators or reptiles, or jellyfish or whatever, back in the primordial soup. So we have this sort of central, visceral, slow, phasic movement. And I think a lot of us are deficient in that, because what I've noticed is the more articulate your spine is and the more agency and the ability to move from the center out, the easier it is to solve problems in real time, think creatively. And so this goes almost like back to the Eastern philosophy of your base chakra is groundedness, right? Your next chakra up is your sacral chakra. That's, your center of passion and creative energy. I really, really encourage people to really one day, I don't know, just sit on the ground and lie flat on the floor with your two knees bent and just rock your sacrum for 30 minutes. From side to side, up to back, down. You can just do gentle circles, just very, very slow, soft and gentle movements, and then go for a walk. And then a lot of people have such a powerful paradigm shift or such a different sensation of how they walk, how the world shows up to them and what that sort of feels like. And I think, if you look at my room, everything's square and guarded. There's no more natural shapes. There's no more creativity, nature, fluid, problem solving, rules. Regimented. I mean, we come out of an era of war and consequence and industrialization, and it's all of the above. All this massive back end programming, and your job as a human is basically to liberate yourself from that, and culturally as well. And I know I'm rambling on now, but
no, it's good. I follow.
We see it with runners here in college. Okay, so you get a scholarship and you're going to go to some big college, right? And what's the purpose of universities and college? To open and broaden your mind and your perspective, and to teach you new ideas, and to basically liberate your mental and emotional shackles from you, right? You go to American college here, they'll say, at this college, this is how we run, and these are the drills you're going to do. No, you're powerless to disagree. You're there on a scholarship. They hold the future of your life in their hands. And this is how we do it. And people become branded to, I know people that, 30 years later or 40 years later still talk about their colleges, and cannot separate the identity from it. And so it's a really interesting thing. Is it probably for me, luckily, moving countries, that totally changed my paradigm. Giving up my old profession, that kind of totally changed my paradigm. Learning a new profession from a new way, from a really good teacher, that was pretty liberating. But most of it is work on self. And I really, so to carry on with this mind shift and change, I work with a couple of athletes, and you kind of know who it's going to land with or not. But when they start to understand their body and start to trust and have confidence in their body, literally how they show up in the world starts to change. So how they see the world changes. and how the world sees them changes. And it's so powerful that you almost have to start preparing people for it. Someone with a sort of very vague posture, shifts their feet, isn't grounded, is injury prone, is kind of in fear or victim mode. There's a language of like, I get injured every 6 months, or, injuries are part of the game. They start having a secure posture. They stand their ground, they stack their joints, they have confidence in their movement in their body, they understand it sort of better than a lot of other people. You go from a sense of sort of rationalization to a sense of knowing. And once that sense of knowing starts to come into an athlete, literally, their coaches will change, who they work with will change, how they express themselves in the world changes, people's relationships around, there's often big power differentials will suddenly start shifting because, as you say, unfortunately, a lot of when the doctor knows best, there's a power differential, and like you say, I don't know how you describe it. I say I try and walk with people. I don't want there to be a knowledge. I'm a guide rather than telling you what you should do. And you're not saying, well, I know the secrets of really good running and you should listen to me. And this is what's wrong with you. It's not that. It's trying to get the person to understand their body and express themselves. And I think, I know it sounds crazy, but working on that, suddenly you become more creative and you see more solutions. And again, like I think unless you want AI to rule your life, there's a new world where you're going to be enslaved by artificial intelligence or it's going to liberate you. And if you want to be liberated by AI, you better be able to be very good at what humans do. And humans are really good problem solvers and seeing big pictures and patterns. And for me, it's very clear that the more flexible and adaptable and malleable your body is, the more flexible, adaptable, and malleable your mind is. And it's just neuroplasticity, really.
That was really well said. And I definitely agree, even in my own experience, when, the Foot Collective is all about play. We think that play-based training is actually one of the most powerful and underestimated methods because it actually it removes the work element and brings people back into their bodies, back into this childlike sense of doing something enjoyable because it feels good and it's fun. And I think fun has been demonized as this thing that is a waste of time or is frivolous, but actually fun, story and play are the two most OG primal learning technologies. And we seem to have just forgotten those. And back to what you were saying.
I'm going to interrupt you now. Sorry, I'm going to interrupt you because I've just, I once watched a really well-respected, this is the author of textbooks, work with a person and he was like, you're going to do this and this and this and this is wrong. You need to engage that and this is weak and blah, 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 and this whole protocol. And then he says at the end, and the patient that totally checked out, like they were just blown, defeated, tired. And he says, and now we're going to add gamification because gamification is very important,
I don't think he knows what that means.
Anyway, sorry, carry on.
Yeah, no, that's a sure sign that someone doesn't play enough. When they give you a regimented thing and then try and sugarcoat it with a cherry saying we're going to gamify it, it's like, I think you ruined it, bro. What I was just going to say was just this, to what you were saying before, where people literally identify with the school they go to. They take pride in that. They're like, it's part of their identity. I think there seems to be this, as we've sort of fractured in the digital world, I think there's this, and also as we've moved away from religion in general, whether that's an accurate generalization or not, in my experience, it seems to have been so. I think there's like this vacuum where people crave belonging. And it's almost like whatever they can stick to first becomes super sticky because it's just this inherent need that's not being met. And it's very easy to find belonging in the wrong place. But even if you know it's the wrong place, it's more comfortable to feel like you belong somewhere than to be out on your own. And so, like you said before, I think courage is like will be a really big theme in this evolution into sovereignty and critical thinking and people feeling empowered to learn about the body experientially and also just thinking about things instead of just believing them full scale. But I think the courage to just be okay with not knowing, like the idea of just reminding myself that I don't know very much at all and I have so much to learn opens the door to curiosity. And that is way more fun, right? It's actually fun to admit that you don't know anything. You might know a lot, but it's more fun and there's more opportunities to learn and explore and discover the world, the unknown little corners that you now can acknowledge exist. And maybe you want to go there, maybe you don't. But in this previous world where if you go and pay a shitload of money and get the fancy degree, you're acknowledged as the authority and expert. There's no longer anything for you to learn. You already know the stuff. And so it's almost like this, they almost paint themselves into this box of comfort. And it's so similar
then
to the
becomes a
cave of
prison.
comfort that people with injuries find themselves stuck in, where it's like, well, I'm very comfortable here. I take more and more external stuff to keep myself comfortable, but it's super comfortable here. I don't have to venture out into the unknown. So yeah, it takes courage.
Yeah, but then ultimately becomes a prison of your own making, And I think what people need to understand is, like, if you're not scared or apprehensive or nervous, you're not living. You like, I'm going to do a little bit more podcasting, and I'm like, I don't know enough. There's no ways. Like, this can't be. This is so intimidating. There are such clever people in this space, and so if you're not having self-doubt or fear or apprehension, you're not doing it right. That's the reason. That's how you should be going for it, not retreating, and again, play. And again, we talk about this environment. It's totally okay to fail, because we need to make mistakes so we can learn from our mistakes. What's insanity is repeating this mistake and doing the same thing, expecting a different result. And I think, unfortunately, for a lot of people, they've actually got to wake up and realize that you're in a prison of your own mind and your own doing first. And I know that sounds weird, but I've seen it in movement. People start to move creatively, and then they wake up and go, okay, well, hang on a minute, this doesn't serve me, or I don't like that. It just starts a cascade, which is one of the reasons I'm absolutely so passionate about what I do, and why you want to do it on a bigger scale. Empowering people, and like with your feet, your feet find the ground, and a lot of people get out of their head and become embodied. And once you're out of your rational mind and you're more embodied, I'm sure you've seen this play out many, many times. People's lives change, and it changes for the better, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And I almost find that the people who have had the most arduous experience with the conventional disease care system have put so much time and money into it, so much effort, like honest effort. Like, they're doing everything they're told. They're being compliant with what the experts are telling them. And then they're just told, take your shoes off, go for a walk, maybe go step on a balance beam or a branch, and just like have fun, take some breaths, be in the sun. And they do that, and they feel better after half an hour than they have in the past 3 years of spending thousands of dollars. Yeah. It really smacks them up. And so they either go one of two ways. They either just discount it as there's no way that could be so. And then maybe they have to try it a few more times to really be like, actually, I can't lie to myself. This feels way better. And it didn't cost me thousands of dollars. And it was actually fun. I'm going to do more of this. And I'm going to find more people that like to do this, so I can do it more with other people.
And you find a new tribe.
Yeah, exactly. Find the play tribe. Find the tribe of healthy people, and just go hang out with them. Like, don't try and find the most decorated group of people in terms of degrees. Go find the people who are the healthiest. And I think this is, TFC, our first official certification is called TFC Guide. And it's really trying to change the paradigm of, you don't actually need this crazy big degree. You just have to have a motivation to take care of yourself at a deep level. Like, go really deep in understanding, how does this body work? What are the natural inputs required for this body to function at an optimal high performance state? And how do I bring myself from whatever state I'm in right now to restore myself back to these beautiful default well-functioning settings? And the journey of doing so is actually what prepares me to then share my story with others and share my experience with others and be a guide for them. It is not this theoretical understanding or this degree on the wall that makes me competent. It's actually being able to own the fact that I took care of myself and I brought myself through this transition. And I think the heroes of tomorrow, the health heroes of tomorrow, are the people who maybe have had the most radical transformations in their own life and have just decided to share that with others. They're not the people who are the smartest people necessarily. They're the people who are healthiest in an honest, true sense. And that's exciting to me, because I love hanging out with healthy people and hearing all the varied and different ways that they got to a state of better health, because there's not one path. But yeah, it's just it feels like there's a shift. I don't know if it's the United States is clearly has hit a big inflection point in their leadership and the administration wanting to go for health. Like, I think RFK Jr. is going to do shocking things to just radically right the ship to at least start going in the right direction. But I think at the end of the day, health is a personal revolution. And it's, whether we have free will or not, everyone has the choice to do something different tomorrow, but it requires courage to do so. So maybe that's the end note.
Yeah. And well, I'm going to compliment you in that, and then we can have an end. I'm going to have the last say now, Nick.
You can, for sure. That's not the end of the podcast. That was just maybe the end of my.
Okay. And I think, look, probably people listening to this we're in a bit of an echo chamber. You probably, a lot of like-minded people are listening to this, but if you're sitting on the fence, if you're not like-minded, what I was trying to, and we go back, like, you can basically Google an ankle rehab protocol. So that's probably not where the differentiate as a practitioner is. It's probably your people skills and a whole bunch of other things. But what happens is, and I've explained this to sort of doctors in the past. I said, like, you can disagree with, let's say, chiropractic. You don't like chiropractic. It's bad. It's blah, blah, blah. You've got strong opinions about this, right? I said, the problem is that if someone comes to you with a headache and you say chiropractors are bad, and then they go to their chiropractor, have a really positive response, you're suddenly the quack, not the chiropractor. And I think people really, really need to understand that if someone's really frustrated with a paradigm, they go somewhere else, they find an empowering solution that lights them up and is life-changing. You're the bad egg, despite being, almost feeling like you're on the side of the good and the right, And so it's a really, really, like, people need to get inclusive, and, it's totally okay. Let's say if you're a pretty formally trained podiatrist and you want structure and orthotics, and that's mostly what you do, and possibly you're doing surgery, it should be totally okay to say, like, look, that's not my sphere of competence. These guys do that. I suggest you get involved, because then you get the trust of the patient and we start to work together synergistically. And, going back to America's politics, it's so divisive, and we 100% need to get out of divisive and start seeing some synergy and commonality and being able to walk a mile in the other person's shoes. And then that reflects back to that authenticity, because if you can't authentically show up who you are, you're never going to be healthy.
Yeah, and I think health might be the great uniter, because it doesn't matter if you're red or blue. Everyone wants to be healthy and feel better. And so maybe that's the bridge, right? To say, okay, we can put our political differences aside because there's a more important thing at stake hierarchically, and that's health. And we should all be on the same page because we all want to be healthy. And I think, yeah, and there might even be the doctor that says, I don't like chiro, don't go see a chiro. There may actually be an experience he had where he sent someone to a chiro, they had a brutal experience. And then back to what you were saying at the very start, information overload, the mechanisms we use to deal with information load, like chunking and association, right? Yeah. One chiro is bad, therefore all chiros are bad, because it's too overwhelming for me to go one step later and say, what did that chiro actually do? And then maybe be against that approach. But again, if it's a different person, there might be a different outcome. So I just think there has to be, I think the future of health is the doctor might be the node that has incoming people that are coming to see them, but they need to have a network around them of people of various disciplines that they know and understand and trust and have vetted. And with TFC Pro, what we're trying to do is create that network so the doctor doesn't have to take a bunch of extra time, which they're probably already short of, to try and vet all these people. And they might not even know the right way to vet them. And really all we're doing as Pro is setting out a fundamental layer of principles and saying, if you align with these principles, then you align with our community philosophy of empowering people to take better care of themselves. And we want to make you available on the directory so that people can find you instead of having to do the guesswork and maybe going to a pro that doesn't treat in alignment with that principle. And I think over time, we don't have to be against disease care. Like I'm very careful with making sure I'm not spending any energy fighting disease care as much as I sometimes want to, because that energy should just be put towards building healthcare, and it will literally obsolete disease care without even trying over a long enough period of time. Because all it takes is one good experience with one healthy, like-minded practitioner to be like, I don't need to go see all these professionals anymore. I can just go see this person. They are my guide, walking me along the path. If I get off the path or if I go astray, I know they're not going to tell me exactly what to do, but they'll at least bring me back onto the right path so that I have the right direction, right? They'll recalibrate my compass is almost like the way I think about it. And I think that's a fresh it's a less serious approach too, because on the side of the pro, people's health is no longer your responsibility. I know so many pros that are just burnt out because they are onboarding the responsibility for other people's health, which is a losing game because you're not in their bodies all day. You don't even know what they're doing when they leave the clinic. And so I think the approach of a guide is like, your health is not my responsibility. My responsibility is making sure you have the right information to make better choices. And that at scale, that is scalable. And at scale can result in massive changes in shifting the culture of health away from identifying with your disease and feeling okay that it's just inevitable, your genetics or whatever cop out people sort of have adopted, to this open mindset of, my body's a reflection of what I do with it. If I do better things with it, it will feel better. So I just got to find the right person that can point me in the right direction and then get to work. And it can literally just be micro changes each day, but it has to be consistent. And I think that is a much more welcoming and maybe even attainable goal, because the goal is just a little bit better tomorrow. Like, you're not going to lose 500 pounds in a month. Like these silly fast health is actually just like this weird trick where it lures people in to the appeal of a cheap lunch, right? Or something for nothing, when in reality it doesn't exist. And we just slow health, the culture of slow health and leading by example is, I think, I'm excited about that future, because the idea that my daughter could live in a world where people are mostly healthy and there's a culture of health and physicality, I think just people will be nicer to each other when they feel good.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and I think, I mean, you said that beautifully, and there's not much to sort of add, or I don't really have, just the reinforcement of that. And I think that, again, as you get healthy and more confident in your body, you tend to become less judgmental. And again, as you become more sort of grounded and your nervous system calms down, you stop. It seems to me that you stop sort of, people get ahead of themselves, want something that they don't have. It's almost like credit card, like buy the holiday you don't deserve with the money you don't have and pay it back later. You know what I mean? So I'm very averse to hacks. I don't like hacks. Generally speaking, I mean, if there's a more efficient, effective way to do it, then by all means. And one of the things I'm not going to call you out on, but like, I think if people hurry slowly, you'll be amazed at how quickly things change. But when you try and change things quickly, you'll be amazed at how resistant, because we systems-based organisms, and systems are incredibly resistant to change, however you want to flesh it out, But sometimes hurrying slowly can bring about such radical change that it's actually extraordinary, But it's like a paradox. Like, if you want it, it doesn't come. But when you don't want it, suddenly the doors open up.
Yes. And the good thing is, in my experience, change is hard. People change through curiosity or pain. Most people don't have the bandwidth to be curious. And so pain is the ultimate catalyst for change. The hope is that people don't have to get to catastrophic pain to really get their ass in gear and bring a sense of urgency, right? Like, you can still take the process slow, but have a sense of urgency that just is a forcing function to just prioritize it. Like, literally scheduling a walk for some people is the difference maker, in my experience, where people love to do they want to do all these things, but it's not in their calendar. And that's what stops it from happening. And sometimes it's that simple, just a prompt for a simple thing that you can do. And I guess, Lawrence, before we sign off, is there any parting words, wisdom that you want to share, or a place to send people if they want to learn more about what you do, what you offer? This has been a really awesome conversation. It kind of, I don't have an agenda. I used to have very rigid agendas to make sure I was prepared. And what I found was, the more rigid the agenda, the colder the podcast was. And so wherever we went today was super fun. I look forward to listening to this when it does go live, and appreciate your time. So parting words, wisdom, places where people can find you.
Yeah, thank you. I think conversations without too much agenda are valuable, and I think people are craving them, because I think, there's so much dogma out there. LawrenceVanLingen.com. And I've got an Instagram, also my name, and a YouTube, my name, and that's about that. And my parting words are like, exactly, just go for a walk. Take your next meeting And if you can, just go for a walk because you're going to think better on your feet. You're going to think more creatively, and be the example that you want to see show up in the world. We big into walking the tire, which is for different reasons. Yeah. And our neighbors said, like, eventually they mocked us and they teased us, and then they weren't sure about this, and then now he's like, hey man, can you make me a tire? He also wants to walk a tire. So I think just be the change that you want to see in the world, and find your tribe and like-minded people, and really try and surround yourself with people that are going where you want to be, because whatever you surround yourself with is probably where you're going to end up. And so I think that's important. And I think the other, I don't want to lecture, but for me, is the more you give and just give and put out into the world, the more you'll be rewarded. There's a little bit of a delay, like everything. Just hurry slowly, but just put out goodness into the world and try and make the world a better place. And whenever you feel frustrated or hurt or angry or wherever you are, just give and get out there and get a bit of urgency and put yourself out there, and, baby steps. And pretty soon I think you'll find the world sees you in a different way. It's just the world is basically just a feedback mechanism. And what you put out, what you reap, you will sow. So get out there, one little baby step, one walk at a time, and make the world a better place.
Well said. That's a good place to end. And my favorite thing that I heard from you was just the idea of holding ideas lightly. I think that's something that can create a lot less suffering, frankly, because I think sometimes when there's conflict with people's ideas, if you've internalized the idea as part of your character, then it's easy to internalize the idea being challenged as your identity being challenged. And that can easily trigger a defense response. And I think just being okay treating ideas like clothes, and being okay changing clothes once in a while, because sometimes the old clothes don't look good anymore and it's time for a little refresh. So Lawrence, thank you for your time.
Probably every pain in the world has been by a rigid idea. Dogmatic. Yeah.
You're right.
So, I know. We can go on. Thank you very much.
We'll do it
really
again.
enjoyed
We'll
this.
do it again. That was really fun. I think, who knows, the prediction that big change is coming. Maybe we can do it again in 6 months, see where we're at, and continue the conversation. And Lawrence, I appreciate your time. Everyone at TFC who's listening, if you got to here, thank you for being here and listening. And we'll catch you in the next Restore to Explore podcast. Ciao.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on the Restore to Explore podcast. If you enjoyed this episode and want to hear more, the best way you can support us is by leaving a review and subscribing wherever you are catching this episode. If you want more free TFC training and education, are after some of our training tools, some natural footwear discounts, or want more specialized guidance from a trusted TFC health professional, then thefootcollective.com is the place to go. You'll find all of the helpful links in the show notes.